We're gonna try to. Oh, I see some bars. Okay, so I think I got the sound now. So I think we can continue. This is Namo Kofi Joe. This is AfricaOnTheMove.com. You're listening to The Roof is on Fire. We don't need no water, and we're gonna get this thing going this time. I'm a little tired now. I've been up trying to do this for quite a while, and I'm having some mess ups. So we're gonna get it done this hour, okay? So yes, the roof is on fire. We don't need no water. This is your brother Namo. I don't want to get into all the explanation I tried to get into before. I'm just gonna jump right into it. This episode or this talk is called Decolonizing the Mind. I'm doing a series of work this year. It's been on decolonizing the space, and what has come to my mind has been that I can't decolonize a space unless I decolonize my mind. And if I want to go to that next phase, that's where it's going to start. It's not going to start on the external. It's going to start from internally, within inside of me. So yeah, this has been my month. This has been my grand rising. September 4th was my birthday, and I'm trying to you know, look back on that day and I realized that I would never have gotten this far if it wasn't for the ancestors, and they've carried me. They've walked with me. They've talked to me. They made me, pointed me in the right direction. And so, there's been a lot of things around that I've been focused on this year, and without getting too deep into it, but my mother and father, they both passed about 11 years ago, and I recommitted my life to the work that I was doing while they were alive, and that was, my craft, and I've tried to exemplify my work behind what they taught me and what they put in me, and what they wanted me to carry on. Um, we had we welcomed one of our ancestors this month. Asada Sakura passed away a few days ago at 78. This sister I've carried with me even while she was alive. Her story, her beliefs. She was living in Cuba at the time that she passed, and I just honor her. I had read her book back in I think it was '83, and I was just overwhelmed. The book was phenomenal, and it was one of those books you just can't put down. And to know that I had read her book and understand her life, and somebody had told me to read the book, so I read it. Not based on my own research, but somebody let me know about who this sister was. And I'm going to do a piece, a digital piece on her sometime in the next year, and I'm going to try to use that piece to as a remembrance, as a memorial, but also as a living ancestor and somebody in my life that has always been present. And now I know she's even more present, because I can feel that with her passing. So yes, my sister Sada Sakura was a great woman, one of the people that should be placed on a high level of ancestral veneration in our community. So look forward to me being able to produce that and put that out. Okay. Tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about brainstorming. What's the process of doing work? I'm in that stage right now. I have a lot of ideas. I'm getting ready to start a new series, which I'll talk more about in October, but it will be called Bend Reality, High Truth versus Deep Fake. And without getting too deep into it, that has been a series of of ideas that are focused on. Really, it's from what I've just gone through. So I've been through a series of paintings called um, "Decolonizing the Space: Take My Soul to the Next Phase," and now this series of paintings will be a kind of a continuation of that. And so wait and see. I have some already wrote out a few of the ideas, and I'm building on them. And I think as an artist, as a creator, as a crafts person, um, it's important for you to think through what you're going to do next. What is going to be your you know way of looking at things. But first, let me get into a little geopolitical news, and let's start with Gaza. Gaza has been under a siege, under attack by the Israel government and by the United States government, which funds Israel in all its weapons and arms, and a lot of other European countries. And the problem that I have with uh, this whole situation is that the Hamas was an elected group of leaders from the Palestinian people. They were elected because they believed that the Hamas political party held their best interest. Okay. When Israel found out that Hamas had won the political, reign of, policy making in Gaza or in Palestine, the the Israeli government, which had since its existence in 1943, has always been on a campaign of extermination, genocide, uh, depopulating the Palestinian people to build more Israeli settlements. But they've used the October 7th date as a date that they're just going to go ahead and commit some of the most greatest murder and torture to the people that has ever been done on on the land. And I have to say that because over 63 in the last 2 years, over 63,000 Palestinian people have lost their lives in a state now that is being starved. They're being relocated, and all of this as a result of what they consider to be protection of who they are as a people. There was something I heard today, something about that they've been fighting this war for 3,000 years. That's that is utterly impossible for one, and the fact that the the using it as a reason to continue what they're doing today is even more madness. But to think that they don't want to bring up the fact that in 1948 the state of Israel was formed, and the conditions that are being placed on the Palestinian people today based on uh, their conditions will only make these conditions for the Palestinian people worse. The Hamas political party was their legitimate answer to Israel. There was no one in the world that was banning, was uh, 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 being able to protect the Palestinian people more than Hamas. And to this day, there has been nobody stepping up to do that. There's this effort to, de-escalate the situation by wanting a ceasefire and wanting the hostages back. But in all of that, there will never be any peace until the Israeli people understand their role in what they have done over these last 70 years. Uh, so let's not forget the Palestinian people and the struggle that they have to go through just to maintain their existence as a people. And it's kin to what has happened to the indigenous people here on the Americas, where Europeans came and slaughtered the indigenous people to build this land. The Israel is made up of Jews, but those Jews are also European. Let's not forget that. They also practice a Zionism where they believe that it's their biblical right or their, Jewish right to occupy and take control of the land that they felt that you know, they can trace back to some, uh, Old Testament story. Okay. So we need to make sure that when we come up against these these Abrahamic religions, that we put them in context with our own people, and make sure that we understand that as African people, that there was a there was not a civilization. I don't like using that word, but there was a a mass of people that practiced a high truth that was thousands of years older than what had been practiced at the beginning of this AD and BC time. The actually at that time, those religions used the stories that were told that were 5,000 years old to build their stories and to build their identity and their ideological base. So let's just keep that in mind when we talk about these things. The the other thing that I wanted to talk about, which is very big, what's going on right now, is the lack of focus on white crime. There's, when you look at this country, when you look at everywhere around the world, Europeans have committed more atrocities on land, on sea, than any group of people on the face of the earth. And I don't have the statistics to prove it. I don't have any, documented evidence, but I do believe that the the problems that have been faced amongst all the indigenous people around the world have been faced from intrusion or interruption of something that they were doing at the time when some Europeans decided to come in and to take over their land for their own purposes and for their own, benefit. Colonization has affected everyone on this planet. The idea that you can take a foreign leader cross an ocean, and even not even cross an ocean, but actually go cross land and sea and place your flag in the ground and declare that you have the right, to a God-given right at that, to uh, put some kind of manifesto or some mandate out that you are basically supposed to be rulers over, this land and over these people. This has been one of the major uh, uh, impediments to any real humanity that could exist on this planet. And until we address colonization, until we address slavery, until we address capitalism, we will not be able to move forward as a humanity, as a people. We have been colonized, in our thinking. In some ways, we look at change as being dissident. We would rather live in this hell. We would rather live in this toxic mess. I did this recently. I did this, and I haven't really released it yet. But I'm doing this focus on, uh, they talk about make America great again, but when was America ever great? That was my question. And the other one is that, you mean all you're really trying to do is make America a horror again. And it has always been horrific to African people. This country has never been a place where it hasn't been nothing but a nightmare. And we have to focus on that. We have to see that as in its true form. And so I did this Make America Horror again, because when you think about the policies that they want to enact, the direction that this country is taking, it is always focused on bringing back the days when they first landed here, and they fought a war against themselves. Even at that time, it was the British against the so-called Americans, for the right to, to exploit and oppress the land here, right? And the so they were fighting themselves then. They fought themselves during the Civil War. They've been fighting themselves in World War I, World War II. And then when you look at the streets of America, they're sending troops into areas where people are poor, people are drug infested. People are lacking resources and accommodations for this from since the time they've been here. They're sending troops into there, but the majority of the crime and the people that sit in prisons today in America are white people. They're the majority. So wouldn't they make up with the majority of actual criminals? And they do. So they're now proportionately to African people living in America. There's a higher percentage of us as based on our population, but that could be still directed, like I'm sure with a lot of Europeans, to poverty, to drugs, to a lack of education. So I'm not trying to differentiate ourselves with that, but I do believe that we have a different worldview. And at least I do, and I want that to be some of the things that I think about more than ever, is that I don't think like Europeans. Okay, as much as they've been colonized, and as much as I've been colonized, I want to be decolonized, right? I want to have, I want to be, I want to, it works to my advantage to be decolonized. So tonight, that's what I'm trying to focus on, in decolonizing my mind. There was a few things that I could have brought to this conversation that I'm not, but I definitely believe that self-criticism has been a big part of of my growth. I've really focused on what I have done, in life, what I have, been subjected to, and how I can alter that state of mind. How can I, look at, my own, you know, uh, uh, you know, uh, self and say, what could I have done differently? What part of me needs to be worked out? That's probably why, in a lot of ways, I picked up a lot of books on African history, because I knew that there was a lot of things that were in me that I needed to correct. I needed to focus on. And without a real clear understanding of who I am, how could I have done that? How could I have been you know the person that I wanted to be, and not stay true to who I was as a person, as a being, and I think for a lot of people that's not very important. I don't think that what we it's almost like the external is more important than our own imagination. And I tend to believe that because the way I look at the world is through my imagination. And I think everyone else does too. I think that we almost underestimate our imagination or for change, like what we could do differently. And I tend to spend more time focused on what I can do, internally to bring about some change in my life, and exhibit that, bring that to fruition, present that, and so I think that it's important for us to look at our creative ability, how much we can imagine, how much we can see, forward, in our thinking, because without that, um, we'll be settling. We'll be mad at each other because we haven't used our imagination. We accepted the reality for what it is and not taking into consideration that you have a mind. Your mind is has an ability to imagine, and not to say that you have a great imagination, or not to say that you have a less of an imagination. It's the fact that nothing that we see, nothing that has ever been created, no ideological focus that we've ever had has been other than somebody's imagination. And I just don't believe in a supernatural being, and nothing can really, there's no real evidence to prove that. And you know, so I think that that's where we need to focus. I think that that's where we need to focus. I think that's where we need to be able to differentiate from what is real and what is imaginative, because the problem lies in our thinking that somehow or another, um, uh, things will just change. Things and things do change, but the reason why I believe things change, or because somebody imagined something and then he was able to create that in his own mind, and then he was able to present that in such a way that you know it made a difference. It brought about some material change, and so that is like the major focus for me. I don't I don't expect uh, everyone to see things my way, but I do expect myself to, no matter what I see, that I'm going to be a certain type of person about it. You know, and I think that's the challenging part, is that I want to be uh, able to imagine something and be okay with the fact that it's only me, that imagined it. I want to have such a unique style in my work that um that I did it, you know. And I think everybody has that. I think everyone has in them the imagination of them, of what they can do with themselves. And to me, that is the most important part of our existence. And to allow somebody not to be able to, I'm not talking about anything else other than imagine, okay? Because I'm sure that based on your environment, based on your heritage, what you might imagine might be totally different than what I would conceive. And in the proper context, it would still be okay. But I do believe that people have been so subjected to the horrors of this country, the horrors of this world, that you may not want to really know what they imagined. Their imagination could be based on a whole lot of fear. Their imagination could be based on a whole lot of superiority, and not on a level that we should all be equal, you know. And so I caution what I feel, my own self criticism is that the things that I say are working for me. They're working because what the process that I went through, what I've learned. Um, I'm not here to say that I have a process that is suitable for somebody else, because I don't know exactly what they've been through. I don't know exactly, you know, I know what the horrors I've been through. I know the fear that I've had, but I've tried to, address my life in a certain way from the internal, and hopefully that will help, me continue to move on, But part of that too is what I've learned over these years is that um, I've connected with my ancestors. That's not a very you know popular thing, in the world that we're living in. We are not we're programmed to actually not look from within, to focus on something external, and that's where I think I differ, and why my work looks the way it does is because I wanted to make sure that my work wasn't, familiar. It was not similar to somebody else's concept of the way we should live, because I think that in a lot of this is me saying that uh, we're all like that. We all have an internal mechanism that uh, dictates, what we see, what we do, how we act. And so I guess, one of the things I felt like I've been trying to do is focus in on that, focus in on, you know, uh, why I choose humility. And I know I'm rambling and I'm going on and on about a lot of different things, and I'm not really as focused as I should be. But and I'm not really following what I was planning on doing tonight anyway, because I had went back and got a transcript of the night before, and I thought I was going to be able to read that and just try to go off the top of the dome like that, and it didn't really work. And then I'm still getting text messages, so I'm kind of still doing that mess. But I'm eating. I got some watermelon here. I'm supposed to be eating, and I'm getting kind of hot. So let me go and give me a little of this watermelon while I'm rambling. Okay. I know you ain't supposed to be eating while you doing these things, but this is me. And this watermelon kind of good, and my throat was getting a little dry. And so let me see. Oh yeah, okay. I was going to talk about uh, geopolitical. I find it probably rambling on a little bit about my material reality, and but the brainstorming is also important. So my process has been drawing, and I have books that I've used, and I probably have written probably about 4 or 5 books, but it's probably over 60 books of drawings that I could comprise into maybe, five, real markers, probably 5 decades of real work that I could put together in each volume and show you, not only the progression, my imagination, and how I kind of really, you know, have moved forward, in life, how um, each book speaks to uh, some criticism, something that message, um, that reading of my mind, because they're pictures that I've drawn, and these pictures um, don't always make it to the canvas, but there's still those pictures. And what I found is that I've done a lot of reading, and I've always felt that some of the things that I read, I would want to make them uh, a picture, because I think a picture, there was always told that a picture is a thousand word, what a picture is a thousand words, and I think that sometimes all the reading and all the things that I've studied, you know, um, I want to be able to put that in a picture to help people read faster, if that makes any kind of sense. Like, some things are so hard to explain that you have to write a thick book, you know, about that thick, about what it is. But if you can take a picture and compress all that idea down into one image, what would that look like? So that's the kind of brainstorming I'm talking about. You know, you know, that's that's the difficult part, because that doesn't happen too easily, and it takes a lot of information that it takes a lot of information to to try to put all that together. And then the other part about that is and I'm going through this now with these more and more series of paintings, all these more and more uh, uh, these you know these works, is that as much as the external plays an important part, the world that we live in, the reality that we live in, the the struggle is, do I really care to show my work? Meaning that if this is all something that I imagine and something that's important to me, that is something that is I've demonstrated an ability to do, and I am very content with that. And I think I've trained myself to be content with that. Um, I want to be kind to myself, and I want to be kind to other people. That is it necessarily important for me to show my work now? And especially when I find that when people look at the work, they don't get it, or I have to explain it. And in some of that, you know, this is the whole brainstorming process. Like, what do I put down on paper? And then what do I feel is like something I want to actually produce into a painting that I get real excited about? That I'm like, yeah, I got to put this. I got some ones, they're going to be next year that I'm already excited about because I got them down on paper, and that's a really big thing, is to, put the idea down on paper first, and so I've, then I can develop the idea, even if it's not, where I want it initially, but the thought is there. That's where, all of the information, all of the data, all of the, the digging, all of the collection comes together, and I'm finally able to create something. And but then when I do, there's been times where I would have my work at a show or an exhibit, and I was glad that it was there. I was really, honored and felt real dignified and everything. But I was so complete with doing the work that that you know um I think that has been the biggest thing for me, is just the completion of the idea, and I like to leave it there, because the other part about it, now going to the reality of the external, you know that's not left up to me. That's in the cards. That's that's something that is out of my control. I no longer am in control of it, right? And so I've been learning how not to be so like stressed out about you know what I'm doing, when I'm doing it, how it's getting done, and just staying focused in the moment, and that moment is the completion, and then looking forward to the next completion, but getting back to the brainstorming, um, there's a lot of different ideas, but that doesn't mean they're going to make a good one. And I don't really want to, like, I got some ideas now that you know there's somebody always tell me that a thinking man always comes up with something new, and I have to do a lot of thinking. you know Now you see Kemet, go back over there. But I have to do a lot of thinking, you know and um and I have to do it kind of in solitude. There's not a lot of, now I do like to throw ideas off of folk, though. I do like to, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And get their opinion, because some things, I saw this image one time, and it was puzzling. I just couldn't figure it out. What was it trying to say? And so I had to ask somebody, that I felt, looks at a lot of art, likes art. And I said, what do you see in this? What do you like about this? Or and what they were telling me, I can't actually remember what they said. But that informed me of the decisions I needed to take with the idea. And it will be part of this, Ben Reality exhibit too. But um, there's also stories. I like to listen to people's stories. I like when people, tell me about certain things in their lives, little, what do you call it, the anecdotal situations. And I like to talk about politics. I like to talk about economics. I like to stay up with the socials, with everything's going on in the media, because a lot of those things inform me, and I can address, certain issues, you know, critical issues, that are facing us, and I think that I have to get better at planning, what I'm going to do next, putting a lot of us, um, uh, I have to make sure that whatever I'm thinking about um, addresses the actual, um, uh, you know reason why I'm doing it. Like the right ideological framework. There was something that I've been um, uh, um, one moment. Um, the being able to see. Uh, I kind of lost my thought. That's probably why I'm fumbling and bumbling. But finding I know what it was, that there's different worldviews. There's a worldview that says, I think, therefore I am, right? That is a European kind of concept, right? And then there's, I am because we are. And my work tends to focus on the Ubuntu. I am because we are. But not to say that we live in a world like that. We live in a world where I think, therefore I am. And that's basically, I'm superior to you, you know, and you're underneath me, you're below me. You could be a commodity, I can sell you, I can kill you, I can murder you, I can rape you, because I think, therefore I am, you know. This has been um has to be kind of separated in my thought, I have to be aware of those thought patterns that are colonizing me, and I have to be aware of those thought patterns that are decolonizing me. So, focus on my ancestors, right? Um, the collective, the masses, the consensus, uh, the African, right? That what's inside of me. I have to be focused on that, every day of my life. That's the only way I'm going to survive. I can't do it any other way. And for me to sit here and say that, you know, um, uh, it would be good for me to just keep carrying on like everybody else does here. Yeah, then that to me is the most important. That to me is where I have to do the most self criticism. Like, who am I following? You know, or who am I in company with? Who am I strategizing with? Who is the main drivers in my life? Um, that's the decolonizing, of the mind. Uh, and I've done that. I've been doing that. You know, uh, I probably I can go back and think that there was a well, there's so many different things that come up to my mind. One of the things that comes to mind is when I really do some self criticism. I start thinking about what I have been doing all my life that has been focused on Africa, even if I didn't know that's what the focus was. You know, what has been those things that have kept me there, right? And and I don't know what other people do go through, right? Like, I'm dealing with my own internal, mechanisms, and that has helped me to, address, things in my life, address, my major pitfalls, and and all been easy. I've made a lot of mistakes. I'll always admit that I've been wrong, numerous times. You know, it's been trial and error. You know, I think I've always been like a little scientist, trying to, experiment with this, experiment with that. And but I think that the main part about it is I've been very humble, you know, and don't take nothing away from being humble. Humility is sometimes, for me, sometimes I've been trained to be humble, and humility to me is the first thing I'm going to do, in any situation, you know, and that self-criticism is probably a lot to do with humility, because first I got to humble myself, before I go into any conversation with anybody. you know Never go into a conversation with arrogance, you know feeling like, I'm above you, I could tell you what to do, and this and that, and but I'm also able to detect that from other folk too, and so their body language gives that away. Maybe you see some things they say, some of their words. And I know I'm going off a little bit here, but the the work that I do, I try to make it humble. I never try to show, you know, make the work that I do superior to somebody else's work. You know, I don't think, for one, I don't think that's necessary to transmit or to convey an idea. Uh, I always believed, um, that an idea is the idea within itself. that for you to see the idea, uh, it's, how do you put it? It's complex, it's complicated, but it's made very simple. And that's, I feel like that's my approach. That's when I know I finished. That's when I know that, in the process of just, brainstorming, it's when I've taken an idea that could be very complex, and turned it into something that's very simple. And that to me is the hard part, is because a lot of us can't, see things that way. So, knowing that, you know knowing that knowing that is probably the hardest thing in the world. Is when you reach that, because it takes, there's a process of drawing it. Then there's another process which is even more difficult, of painting it, for me. And but in all of those steps, that complex idea has to remain simple. It has to come across, you know, with clarity. And the other part about that is, uh, it has to be it has to be it has to be done correctly, you know, and that's not always an easy thing to do. And I haven't done it all the time neither. It's always been, challenges, you know, and I guess what I've gotten better at is knowing when I found, like the brainstorming was went through properly, and then the execution was even more, done properly, and so, that's kind of like, the brainstorming for me, is uh knowing, I've done a lot of research, knowing that I've done a lot of thinking about it, knowing that I even had to maybe, draw it out a couple of times, to, make sure that I got the idea right. But the big thing is, because I always feel like once I've got the idea on canvas, and drawing it and drawing it all out, you know, uh, then it becomes the process of, oh, now I got to take it and put it in color, put it in some type of color, black or white or something, and those are the kind of times where I'm almost like, did I really do enough brainstorming? Like maybe I should have spent more time in been mapping out where to lay the colors, where to, put the, this or that, and sometimes I draw it out knowing I think I'm going to come up with that painting. And then I'll spend time painting over stuff because it didn't work. So, like sculpting the painting, with the paint. And so that's, so I'm trying to get, I'm trying to be more improve on those tactics, prove on those skills, prove on that strategy, because I think that I've started taking some paintings that I did back in 1986, right? And which I did 24 drawings before I actually painted the painting. So I'm going back and looking at these paintings. I did about 24 of those paintings, and I'm going back now. And because we're living in this digital age, I'm trying to take the image that I drew 24 times and then paint it into a digital format, and just to see um, you know, how strong of an idea that was, you know, because if I feel like if it was that strong of idea in, in the 90s, and here I'm trying to bring it back in the, in 2025, or 26, uh, what would I have done differently? And would the idea still hold up? And so I went back and redrew the paintings now. Ain't that a trip? Just to see if I would have changed any of the concepts, you know, and now I'm going to put them in a digital form, which I tried to do before, but I just went straight to digital trying to take the painting and copy it, which wasn't a good idea. I needed to draw the painting again and then digitize it, if that makes any kind of sense. But so, when you're talking about brainstorming and putting ideas together, you know, you have to be, you know, kind of, you have to focus on things, kind of strategically. I'm sitting here trying to decide on what I should do next. Um, with this. Let me go see what I can now, have it in front of me here. I'm trying to look at what there was a lot that I said last night that I really wish I was able to hold on to, but I found that tonight I went kind of in a different direction as a result of not being able to, uh, just remember everything. And I am getting closer to the end, so but I hope that this was somewhat of a lesson in in brainstorming. I hope that it was a lesson in some self criticism. You know, uh, and I hope this was a lesson in understanding the world properly and getting the world in the proper perspective, because we are faced with some times now where we can no longer, I believe, look outside of ourselves to expect to bring about some change. I think that the major change that's going to happen to us as a people, the based on people in this society, is we have to turn within. We have to look within, and I think I'm going to have to do something around this whole concept of not so much just brainstorming, because I think that is somewhat could be considered something kind of external, but uh, and we've been brainwashed. That's another part of this that I might have to deal with. Because you have a storm. And what happens in the storming process. It tends to brainwash you into certain things. You know, but and we on our minds have been drained. We have the brain drain too, and so I'm gonna have to do something around that. The whole idea of how do you recapture a thought pattern that once existed that no longer exists because of the brainstorming, the brainwashing, the brain draining, you know, and what becomes of who you are, uh, as a result of not taking into consideration all of those processes, all of that self-criticism, all of that is self-criticism. You know, do you know what you've been brainwashed to believe? Do you know what you've been your brain has been drained of? You know, and do you know what kind of brainstorming you're going to have to go through to regain, some sense of Ubuntu, some sense of self, some sense of your own dignity, some sense of who you are as a people, to remember your ancestors, not only remember your ancestors, but recognize that they're present, recognize that they're walking with you, they're guiding you, they're your focus, they're your attention. And, so I'm gonna have to do something around that too. And I only have an hour. I'm coming up on an hour now, and but these are good for me. I mean, uh, rarely do I have an opportunity to really sit down and talk to someone who I could share some of these things with. But so I use this kind of like as a diary or a kind of a documentation of my experiences. And this was good. This was good. I thought it was last night's one that I kind of deleted was I was improving on my thoughts, and I kept thinking today. I kept saying to myself, "Man, do you really want to go back and take notes and do all that? How difficult that was going to be because of the way you think and the way you talk." And I said, "Well, I'm gonna try." And then I don't know. I got a little messed up today. I had some things came up today that didn't work right, so I just decided to to just do my freestyle. What's the point? I'm trying to get to the point of the matter. And that sometimes requires a shift in the way you think. And because I want to be accountable, I want to be responsible. And sometimes I get in my own way. And but I'm seeking wisdom. I don't want to be no fool. And I want to make a point. I want to make a point. I think that's where that drawing comes in. That's where that all of this comes into play. Is what's life if you're not making a point? It's just pointless. And and do you make points that are really not making a point? Are you making accusations? Are you making assumptions? Are you making just an ass out yourself? And I don't really want to be that type of person. I want to be somebody that tried to do something about the way we were living. I want change. I want things to change. I don't want things to stay the same. And they haven't been beneficial. For all of us, even for those who think it has been beneficial for them. Okay. So we coming up on the end. I got it in, decolonizing the mind. Make sure that you try to get to decolonizing the space so we can take our souls to the next phase. That will be October 25th, 26th, African American Museum. Be there. There'll be music. There'll be poetry. There'll be food. There'll be, some drink, and there'll be some people. I don't know how many people, but there're going to be some people there. Okay, and so y'all need to be there. Y'all need to be focused. Remember, this is the roof is on fire. We don't need no water, and you can catch me on Africa on the Move. You can't catch me, and I ain't hanging out there, but you can go to africaonthemove.com. You can get all my socials, and follow me. You can like it. You don't have to like it. You ain't got to follow. You ain't got to do nothing. Okay. Your actions have no impact on the way I live my life. Okay. I want to be sure of that. Okay. I want to be sure of that every day. Okay. And I try to make a point of that. That's my point, is that I'm focused on, developing, who I am, improving my character. Right. So again, africaonthemove.com. Catch all, get all my socials, stay up, move forward, you know, love your brother and your sister, you know, and stay focused forward ever.